Here with us is 2016 RNC delegate, founding advisor of the Washington office and senior advisor at the Seneca Project, Rina Shah, Democratic strategist and CEO of Northern Star Strategies, Michael Starr Hopkins. Great to see both of you. Michael, I'll start with you. Biden was losing support among black voters. You and I talked about that a few weeks ago. Harris has managed to win some of them back, not completely. What's your reaction, and what should the strategy be to get that demographic back to the Democrats?
Yeah, I think talking about employment and talking about the record of the Biden administration. Look, this is an administration that came in with the government hemorrhaging jobs, 22 million jobs out. Now we're at 16 million new jobs, 2 million manufacturing. I think talking about that and healthcare, Trump stripping away ACA protections, stripping away Social Security and Medicare, I think that's something that really is going to focus in the black community when you talk about uplifting and moving forward.
Rina, what does Trump need to do to hold on to the male black votes he did win over before Biden dropped out officially?
I think in essence, he really needs to not worry so much about them, because bringing people back or keeping them in, it's a daily question that we political strategists grapple with, because this race is so historic in the way that Harris has come out and had this really condensed period of time to reintroduce herself, but also lock in who she believes will turn out for her. And so I think it's about women, women, women. And as Trump continues to offend women of every class, it seems, and stripe, what we see here is a real opening for Harris to go beyond. There's one particular block of women, sort of known as national security women, those concerned about geopolitical tensions abroad and this current administration's handling of it, as well as immigration and southern border concerns, especially, that sort of fill into their communities, even though they may not be close to the border. Those women, I believe, are actually up for grabs. So when we talk about who's retaining who and who's appealing to who, we have to realize that there are some key demographic groups that can shift here in this last 30 days and 60 days as well.
Speaking of those key demographics, Rina, this question is for you. Trump is going after those non-college educated voters. They were crucial for him in 2016. What does he do to keep that base come November?
They remain crucial to him now, and it's about turning them out too. So unfortunately, the playbook of fear is one that he always relies on. It works with those folks. The face of a changing America has long worked for them as well. You know, I find it fascinating that Gen Z is the last generation here in the United States that will be majority white. So these people in general don't need to be talked to about data. They need to be moved on a feeling. So as Trump continues to instill in them a fear and a feeling that Harris is incapable of really tackling the greatest challenges, these kitchen table issues of economic opportunity, as well as immigration, crime, public safety, and reproductive care and access don't matter as much to them, but it can flow in. Because again, when we see abortion restricted, we see women of lower socioeconomic class impacted the most, particularly Black and brown women.
Michael, on the other hand, Harris has found more success with white college-educated people. What does she need to do to win over the un-college-educated?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of Americans who feel like they've been left behind, fairly or unfairly, especially after the market collapse in 2008 and then what happened with COVID. And so I think it's really talking about what the vision forward is, how we're going to make sure that people feel included. And it's talking about unions. One of the big things we've seen in this election is the support of unions, Joe Biden being the first president to ever walk a picket line in support of a union. And so talking about how Donald Trump wants to strip away union protections, wants to strip away overtime pay in states like Michigan, states like Georgia, that's really going to have a huge boon to Democrats. And so being able to bring those voters home is going to be really important.
I have less than a minute, but Michael, young voters typically vote blue. How does Harris get the support, keep the support of Gen Z voters?
Yeah, I think Rina talked about it a lot. It's abortion. Really talking about how this is the first generation to lose rights rather than have new rights. That's something that's really going to hit home with this new generation of kids who are coming into America post-COVID.
Rina, very quickly, Trump is targeting those Gen Z voters with famous podcasters, social media campaigns. He's on TikTok a lot. He says he would save TikTok. Of course, that's a reversal from 2020. What should Trump be doing policy-wise to court those Gen Z voters that both of you were talking about?
Well, conventional wisdom always has led us to believe in the political arena that flip-flops are no good. Well, what we're seeing right now is that they're actually helping Trump in some ways. I don't have great empirical evidence to show exactly what the youth vote and first-time voters in particular, where they're trending to. So it's a little bit of a guessing game. I mean, look, we had only 57% of eligible voters cast ballots in 2020. We don't really know what 80 million Americans who did not turn out to vote, we don't know what they're going to do. So again, another slice of the pie here that we just don't know much about is that first time young voter, and it'll be so interesting to see who they're trending towards in the last 30 days until Election Day.
Very exciting. It's an exciting time. Rina Shah, Michael Starr Hopkins, thank you so much for joining.